Well, good morning, everybody. Today in this forecast video, I've got 5 big things I want to talk to you about. I want to talk about the hurricane and some of the new forecast information we have about it, including its track, especially with respect to Tampa. This is the newest this morning from the National Hurricane Center. I was waiting on this 7 a.m. update before I recorded here. I want to talk to you next about this chance of rain that could be coming through this area and the timing of it. And also I want to get into some discussion about frost risk in this area, which you can see here. So this is this chance out there, day 5 through 10, of actually getting some decently cold air into the eastern half of the country. We just need to talk about why that is and the timing of it. Those are the first 3 things. The next 2 things, we're going to cover some new long-range data we've got from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. And in that, I'm going to give you a little bit of discussion about La Niña and the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, if that's going to be a factor. And then the 5th thing is going to be weather in South America. So that's it. So sit tight. Let's kind of get through all of this. As I'm sure you heard, this was kind of widespread news in the weather community yesterday. Milton's rapid intensification, dropping well more than 50 millibars in a very short amount of time, which we consider to be a bomb cyclone. That's just where the pressure drops at a rate of 24 millibars per day. This, of course, doubled that rate. It now sits on the list in terms of the most intense hurricanes based on barometric pressure here at 897, which is what it achieved yesterday. For perspective, the strongest we've ever observed would have been Wilma at 882 when you just think purely about pressure. In terms of sustained wind speeds, Allen is still at the top at 190 miles an hour, the Labor Day hurricane in 1935, 185. You come down the list, you'll find Milton down here, which hit 180 yesterday. And there was some thought that we were going to see 190 mile an hour wind out of Milton. But again, these are peak sustained wind speeds. So we often find that there are gusts that are much faster than this. But this has to be a 1-minute average wind speed that's observed. So Milton's gust could have been easily over 200 miles an hour. But we use that as the mechanism by which to sort and rank these hurricanes. So just want to be clear on that. Milton, though, the southern edge has hit land, and that's one of the reasons why it's been downgraded this morning. So we've increased friction there as it touches the Yucatan, and that just redistributes the heat. That's part of it, and prevents it from being very symmetric, which is all a mechanism by which hurricanes keep their centralized heating right in the middle of the eye. And it is the eye, and just in case you've never seen how these things work, that is the warmest part of the hurricane. When the hurricane hunters fly into the eye, they sometimes they see a 10 to 15, 20 degree bump in temperatures, all because there is compressional warming in there and just a tremendous amount of heating from latent heating all in the eye wall. But that's one of the reasons why it's clear. The center of a hurricane has descending air. The outside has ascending air. We've seen these cloud top temperatures here get up around minus 80. So very, very cold on the cloud top. So this is just representing a very, very intense hurricane. So looking another way at the data from the National Hurricane Center, again, I'm going to Tomer Berg's website. It's a fantastic one. I've linked it for you before. But we do expect this to re-intensify to Category 5 strength, where it needs to be with a wind speed above 157, which it will likely do as it approaches the loop current. But as we talked about yesterday, the environment right as it approaches Florida, there's some increasing wind shear. It'll be the interaction of the hurricane's leading edges with the land that'll start to weaken it. And as a result, instead of hitting Florida with 160 mile an hour winds, we expect the wind speeds to be 125. Now, the most challenging thing right now, just given the population centers along Florida's west coast, is to determine where it's going to hit. And as we talked about yesterday, the spread that you see here in the cone is historical error that the National Hurricane Center uses. So they use their error, not the model spread, to determine the width of this line. So we talked about that yesterday. But as it stands, if this thing moves 20 miles to the south of where it's currently projected, it will suck water out of Tampa Bay. If it hits currently where it's projected, right along the center line, then Tampa Bay sees 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. If it maintains more strength and goes just 10 miles or 20 miles to the north, I'm talking about where the eye passes over, then we could get 20 to 25 feet of storm surge into Tampa Bay because of the shape of Tampa Bay. And that's what we're all concerned about. How strong will this thing be as it approaches, and where will its trajectory take it? And that is not known yet. We can all make projections, we can look at the models, but we won't know that until we get into tomorrow on Wednesday as it approaches. So model forecast intensity, landfall is somewhere in here. Okay, so we're looking at a Cat 3 hurricane at landfall. That seems to be where it is, or a strong Cat 2. Again, that's because of increased wind shear and the forward edge of the hurricane interacting with land, and that just tends to slow them down a bit. And like I said, the friction and the shear just weaken these hurricanes, but still a powerful one at that. And remember, even though it is being weakened, okay, as it approaches land, it could still have very, very substantial flooding, wind damage, and of course storm surge. And we have to think a lot about those three things. Now I want to show you the model spread side of this just to be clear. So just as you take note here, the spread is still very large on where this could go looking at all the ensemble members. Yes, they all kind of, if you take a close look here, they all kind of, come together. If you average them, they're right on Tampa Bay. And that's what our biggest concern is. And as a result, the storm surge value is still being predicted by the National Hurricane Center. In fact, this should be updated. 7 a.m. update. There it is. They still got it 10 to 15 feet in this area. As we talked about yesterday, this is a very populated area, right? Maybe 3 million people in this whole, if I kind of cut this area out. And on top of that, many of them live below these values. So this is why there's been mandatory evacuations. I've been, to be honest with you, quite proud of what I've seen on people posting what they're doing. They're like, look, we're doing what we're supposed to do. People have been evacuating. I've not seen a lot of people just say, I'm riding this out. That's great. That restores my faith in humanity a bit after the just sheer nonsense I heard from Helene. And I'm not going to go into that today. But so I think a lot of folks here are taking the correct action to get away and then to get everything prepared and get away. And this hurricane, by the way, it will cross, I think, under 7 or 8 hours. It'll be in and out very, very quickly. So this is one of the things that we're going to have to deal with on the human psychology side of this. There's a week of buildup. Right? We started talking about this on Friday night and Saturday morning. At least that's when I was out alerting all of our folks that work and live down here. My first video for it was yesterday. And so there's been already, it'll be Saturday morning until Wednesday evening that will just be building up the fear of this, and that it will cross so quickly in the day on Thursday and be done. And we will get in and do assessment and see what's there to be seen. Now, on the precipitation side of it, just want to let you know that right now, the day 2, so this would be Wednesday morning to Thursday morning, the day 2 excessive rainfall outlook, the National Weather Service has issued a high risk. Of course, we understand that means there'll be widespread flash flooding. And the latest we've got from the WPC, which is it's a good resource for precipitation guidance out about a week from the National Weather Service. I like this one. We now see that there's going to be a stripe in through here, according to their forecasts, of 10 to 15 inches of rain. That's what you've got in this area. What has backed off is how much rain's getting into southern Georgia and parts of South Carolina. So that has changed a bit. We've now got a bit more narrow focus on where the hurricane's going to go. Wind speeds are always going to be challenging to forecast. And I generally, on my website, agweather.com, I just tend to map out the GFS and the ECMWF and the NAM. And I'm not a hurricane expert. I know a lot about hurricanes. I used to teach about hurricanes when I was a professor. But I would never consider myself an industry expert. There are people that are substantially better than me, and they work for the National Hurricane Center. They work in private industry. So I often focus less on looking at all of the hurricane models and mapping them for you and focus on the big ones. That's why I only have these on my forecast page. But I will be adding a lot to that page, including a whole section on hurricanes very soon. So sorry about that. Let's get back to the forecast. When you look at this, what I'll be concerned with is how far inland do we carry these 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And if you ask me to pin it down right now, I think that this whole area here has the chance of seeing 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And when the hurricane exits on the back side, we could be able to see wind speeds 70, 80, 90 miles an hour here as well. Now, this is the GFS interpretation of this. That is one model. I'm going to show you another. This is the HAFS. That's a hurricane model. A. Okay, that's the one we're not looking at. There's A and B, or the one we are looking at, excuse me. Now, this model has in my opinion, one of the worst case scenarios for landfall. So you'll notice that the hurricane is expected to have its center somewhere here, which means we will be packing winds in to Tampa Bay, blowing that water, and the bay will focus those winds. And the bay will focus the waves and the storm surge if it comes in at this trajectory. And we just noticed that we're getting some very strong winds inland, like, gusts. Whoops, I apologize for that. Gusts up here. If we just look over Tampa, Clearwater, this whole area in the, actually, these aren't even gusts. These are just sustained winds. Let's go to gusts. And we see if this will reload. Yeah, 126 I've got in here according to the model. A large area here in the 90s. So very, very strong winds as this goes across. And let's just kind of play it out to see where those strong winds make it. Now, this model has the winds a bit farther to the north than you just saw in the GFS, which was closer here, but still on exit as this hurricane reshapes and reforms. We're going to see some strong winds. By the way, that's noon on Thursday. So if I just give you some timing here, this is midnight Thursday, this is morning Thursday, and that's noon. It's out. I mean, it's that quick, how quickly it goes across, Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So that's it. I don't have any additional things to add to this other than to just stay tuned to the National Hurricane Center if you're in this area. If you've been given the evacuation, just I would say just put it in place and plan on it and execute those decisions as you know how, and just be very safe. We'll watch this carefully and continue to forecast it. Okay, second thing we're going to talk about. The last 7 days continues on this extremely dry streak. Now, we talked yesterday about the storms that were here. We had several severe wind reports. We had the storms on Friday, put down some hail here. Most of the rest of the country saw nothing. I mean, very, very, very dry. So we just saw a bit of rain here, some rain out ahead of Milton and these other couple of areas. As I think about where this is going forward, this is just an accidental page I left open. Let's talk about this. This is the last, let's see here, this begins on September 1 and goes to October 7th, looking at these precip stats. I want to continue to examine these every day in the forecast videos just to watch the statistics evolve, because I'm now seeing more of the 132s really show up here. And that would be the driest in the 132 years worth of data in the midsection of the country. The Northeast still dry. The Southwest still dry. In fact, the whole of the West Coast overall is dry, except for, remember, way back in early September, we had that, those 4 systems that went through here. That's what's biasing parts of Montana a bit on the wetter side. But as I think this through, it just brings me back to some of that soil moisture data, which we're going to continue to monitor. I made the case last Friday that should this carry throughout fall into winter, we have to really depend on spring rains to undo this. And that is a lot of dependence on spring rains to undo the problems of this, which means this increases drought risk in all of these areas for 2025's growing season. We made that case last week. The Mississippi River, I mentioned it yesterday. We were at -10. It jumped up after Helene to almost 7 feet above low stage. But because there's nothing supporting the river levels from the upper basins like the Missouri, Mississippi, and Ohio, it's dropped back down to low stage, 0 right here. So we're going to watch and see what happens to the river going forward. Another thing just to take note of here is that if you just watch the satellite data from yesterday, there's the cloud shield from Milton. There's a lot of smoke in the atmosphere, and many of this kind of the sources of the smoke are coming from the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, parts of Idaho. Then we get here into Montana and Wyoming. A lot of this smoke here is really deep into the upper atmosphere. I haven't shown you this in a while, but I wanted to give you the latest stats. Nearly 40,000 fires so far this year. That's actually less than last year, but the difference is about 5 million more acres burned this year compared to a year ago. As you just kind of look at the rest of the data down here, one of the worst years, 2018. Here's 2015. And the 10-year average is about 6 million acres, 6.1. So we're about 7.6. So just add some perspective onto that. Now, I mentioned there's a chance for some rain, but overall the next 14 days, we are still seeing more dry areas than wet. We're waiting on this pattern to break down. And there are some hints that it's going to break down. And this is where those hints begin. Now, you've seen me show you this. This is that 15-day average height pattern. And I've showed you dark blues in here, right? We've seen that. I've drawn this many times. It's done something like this. There's something that's changed. This has moved here towards Scandinavia. The ridge has now regained position across Central and Southern Europe. The deep troughs that were here are no longer as deep. And that means this ridge will have an expiration date. Things are shifting. We saw the shift begin yesterday here in the forecast over parts of western Russia. That was where I first began to notice that some of the models are picking up on a shift, and I'm going to show you what we've got in terms of the potential here. Now, next 5 days, nothing different. You'll just see the ridge continue to regain its position. A weak trough tries to bite into this by this weekend. I'm going to tell you what this one does in terms of dry air and increasing the chances of rainfall this weekend right here, and the cool air that's going to come into that. But we were always expecting this, right? There were troughs here, and I kept calling them reflection troughs that showed up there simply due to the amplitude of this pattern. I just think it originates in the Bering Sea in Alaska. So that's out there around mid-month. Now we see the ridge try to regain position again, but there is a difference. October 16th, all of the models are attempting to raise heights here. So this is where we keep tossing in troughs. We now see some ridging. So we kick this trough out. The ridge moves east, and the trough jumps in here. And that's where the models, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, are beginning to hint at something different. So now do you see it? There's still a low here, but this ridge has gained position, so there'll be a trough and a trough with ridges in between. Now, I'm making a call on a forecast 330, that's 14 days from now, starting to make a shift. But it is something that we thought could happen middle to end of the month. And it's all kind of breaking down across the northern hemisphere, and there's some movement in a couple of features that can make this happen. I'll highlight those in a few moments. I just want to know if it's a phantom event in the models, or if it's there and it's going to establish, or will persistence win the day? That's going to be the failure mode on this. Sometimes in fall, persistence wins the day. And what happens is the models will tease at a pattern change, and then you've heard me use this phrase before, it just kicks it down the road, kicks the can down the road. It didn't happen when we projected. It was 10 days later. I'm just saying that maybe it is the end of October when this transition occurs, or maybe it's November when it occurs. That's what we're trying to assess and figure out. But in the meantime, you've got this. I've got the European high-res, artificial intelligence, the GFS, the WPC, and the national blend. And what I note is that trough coming through is increasing this in all of the models. See it up here? Chances for rain. I can't really draw very well this morning. And we're improving the chances here. And I'm going to show you kind of what's going on to make that occur. So you just saw it in the heights, but let's actually look at it in a real model run here. This is the European model, so there is our main event with the hurricane. There's still some cloud cover over the Canadian Maritimes, eastern Canada, into the northeast as we work our way through Wednesday. But here's the hurricane, 7 p.m. Wednesday. The European has a 1 a.m. landfall here, and then you'll just notice it zips through quick. That's Friday at 1 a.m. So in a day, it goes from there to there. It's out. Okay, what are we watching beyond that? Here comes our next feature through parts of Saskatchewan in toward Manitoba, maybe clipping the Red River Valley of the North. And that's that corridor that we saw better chances of getting some precip. When is it? Friday night maybe starting, but Saturday it's coming into this area. And it dives into the Great Lakes and turns into a low. And it's got some cold air in it. There could even be some lake enhancement of the precipitation here as well. But there's some really cold and dry air that's coming in on the backside of this, but enough moisture ahead of it to develop some rainfall. And the European model's got a deeper low here, a broad cloud cover. When is this? This is next Monday. And we could be seeing some scattered showers in this area. Now we played out there a bit farther. High pressure dives in behind it. We're going to talk about the frost risk with that. And there's a front that tries to get into the west coast. Take your eyes over to the west coast here. This is Monday night into Tuesday. See that front coming through? That could be our first trough that tries to knock this pattern out and shift it around a bit. That's what I'm waiting on. Overall though, that week 2, while we get a system coming in, the most aggressive model on breaking the pattern is the artificial intelligence. Can you see? The European ensemble, the GFS ensemble, the CPC, not fully on board with a full pattern breakdown just yet. So I just want to let you know we're seeing hints of it. We're going to monitor it, keep you updated each forecast video. Let's go over to the temperature side of it. This morning we had frost advisories for Minnesota, Wisconsin, right here in the parts of West Virginia and then in the Northeast. Here's all the hurricane warnings, just a huge array of watches, warnings, and advisories down here because of Milton. Next 7 days, there's our frost risk. And you can see we're starting to get chances of getting a frost into parts of Iowa, more of Wisconsin, which actually got hit with more frost yesterday than I thought, and then into Michigan. And then you see running up to the spine of the whole Appalachian Mountains here toward the Northeast, the frost risk as well. I want to show you the dew point side of this before I show you the temperatures. So this is dew point temperature, not temperature. That was interesting. My doctor said, what the heck is the dew point? I hear it all the time. Well, the dew point is simply this. If you want to know what temperature you have to cool the air to get frost or fog or dew to form, that's what this number is. So it's actually a measure of moisture. So if it's foggy out, the dew point has been achieved and the air temperature has reached it. You get saturation, 100% humidity. So what we're looking at here is just a measure of how dry the air is. The lower the dew point, the more you have to cool it to get frost. Does that make sense? Or fog, or clouds, or frost, or dew, sorry. So after that little explanation, what I want you to watch is, here's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now watch, as we get into the weekend, Saturday, look at this tongue of dry air pushing in here. Sunday, there's all that dry air that's coming behind this front, and that's where it'll be my Monday, clearing things out, cooling things off. Now, we can use the dew point temperature as a metric for maybe a proxy on the low temperature of the day, because the moment you hit the dew and you create fog, for example, that's releasing heat. That's releasing latent heat. So it's very difficult to take the temperature to the dew point and just keep dropping it like a rock. So what you've got here is maybe a good proxy on where our low temperatures could try to be here. Not down in Texas, but here, okay? So let's take that, the dew point forecast, and let's kind of, whoops, sorry about that. Let's show you, there we go, min temperatures. So here's this morning, quite chilly in the Midwest. That moves east. The heat comes back into the west. Thursday morning, still chilly in this corridor. This is now getting into Friday. Major warm-up coming for the Midwest out of the heat from the west. That's Saturday into Sunday. So that's what we're looking at. Now, Monday's when that front comes through. You can already see the big cool down for the Midwest while the western United States stays warm. High temperatures, here's today's. Getting into tomorrow, look at the heat in the central U.S. There's that Friday temperature that's going to feel like midsummer in the midsection of the Corn Belt. But then remember, on Sunday night into Monday, we have the cooler air coming in. That's going to be a full-on fall day right there. Now remember, I told you, we're not worried about a frost down here in Texas. This is just really, really dry air. So we're not using this dew point temperature, to gauge a frost down there. When is this? This would be Monday early in the morning. So what does Monday early in the morning? The temperature's 50. So it's a full 20, it's almost 30 degrees warmer than the dew point. So nowhere near saturation here, very dry air. But I just wanted to make that point on how we often use the dew point as a floor on the temperatures. Okay, sorry, I still got more to go here. I mentioned earlier that at that point when that front comes through, which again is next Monday, Tuesday, we see a cooler setup in that area. So if you just kind of look here, we get several days starting next Monday where things are cooler across the east for a while as the heat stays in the west. All right. Temperature-wise, just wanted to give you some ranks. This is where things have been. So when I show you that we're going to be getting cool, it's going to really break the pattern away from the heat that we've had in the east, but not a lot of change here in the west. Longer term. So this is bullet point number 4. I want to show you the CFSV2. Now the CFSV2 is interesting because it shows in week 2, this drop in temperatures. There's week 1, week 2. But still very, very warm in the midsection of the United States based on its forecast. What about week 3, week 4? Man, it kept back over to warm as it drops more cold air into Alaska. That's a recipe for heat in the middle part of the North America when it's cold there. On the precip side of things, okay, there's the real dryness. You can almost just see it without me clicking on it. But here's week 3, week 4. It's trying to break some things down, but still not getting a clear signal on it. I think a lot of this breakdown could be due to the fact the MJO is going to leave this part of Africa and over there in this section of the Indian Ocean, and may make an appearance in phase 4 and 5, maybe getting over to phase 6. If you're wondering, well, what does that mean? One of the reasons why we see the models heating things back up again, maybe at the end of the month and beyond after this cool down, is because we're dropping more troughs here. In fact, there's a lot of troughing across this whole area. That's what phase 4 historically means. Here's phase 5. Still more troughs here. And I think that's one of the reasons why the models are favoring this mild outlook. So what are we watching out for? Well, just keep an eye on this area. This is Monday, October 14th. Here we are around the 21st. Still there's troughing in this area, ridging in there. We get out there to the beginning of November. I still see troughs at the beginning of November here. So I would like to know how long this pattern hangs on with troughs in the Gulf of Alaska. because it seems to be dictating, the precipitation outlooks. So for example, we flip this over, that's through November 7th. We've seen the models try to moisten things up once we get into November, but it's going to take a while, I think, in November before we really get a full-on pattern change with this. Okay? So here's where I want to finish this up. 2 more bullet points. The next, are we starting to get a bit of a resurgence in La Nina? Now the trade winds are trying to get going again. So over the next 10 days, we do see stronger easterly winds, but this is all we've got with it. What I'm interested in seeing is this. With all of the warmth you have here and the cool down we've started to see in these areas because of the troughs, I wonder if we're going to connect this up at some point and give ourselves a good solid look at colder water all throughout the areas where I put those hatches. In the Northern Hemisphere, we call that the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and that would be its negative phase. And you look out there into winter, and we start to see near normal to cooler than normal temperatures in this area. If we get a little bit of a negative a negative PDO look, this is the way it tends to behave in terms of temperatures from December to March. Now you're going to have to flip the color bar with me because I can't do it on this plotting tool. Blues are negative correlation and reds are positive correlation. We have a negative PDO, which means this would represent better chances of a cooler winter, and this would represent better chances of a mild winter. All right, if we flip this over to precipitation, what we get here, if I can get this to go, did I click on it? There it goes. Is blues represent, the negative correlation, which means wetter. So wetter Northwest, wetter upper Midwest, Northern Plains, wetter Ohio Valley. We tend to see drier into these areas. Those are just probabilities. But it's one other thing we need to add to the European model forecast we just saw. Now, to get this finished up, I do want to show you the newest update for winter from the National Multi-Model Ensemble, and I'll keep examining all of these models this week. It's also gone wetter in those same areas for the middle of winter and drier here. So I just want to show you there is some relationship here between all of this and the longer range forecast, which is extremely sensitive to ocean temperatures. But bullet point number 5 is where we are now, and I want to show you the latest update globally. We still watch Kirk going into Western Europe, increasing rainfall. We see better rains here in parts of Ukraine, Western Russia. We see rains coming into Western Australia, but the main ag area, don't forget, is there, so this is outside of that. But heavier rains coming into parts of Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, even Tasmania down here. But I want to show you South America, because if you look, you see a lot of the greens representing wetter conditions. And again, on satellite yesterday, you can kind of see Milton here, but if we zoom into South America, there's the smoke, but these are the storms we're watching. And we see that the latest forecast over the next 10 days from the European model, it is the wettest. Here's the GFS, which is a bit drier here. But overall, we're expecting the monsoonal circulation to get going. And that was my last bullet point today. And I'm going to continue with these themes and kind of follow this narrative through the remainder of this week and just see where it takes me. But that's the latest I got for you. So we'll talk again tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Thanks.